We are going to talk about a very, very colorful and exciting topic, data and analytics. So, and after lunch session, talking about such a colorful topic should really get us excited about it, right? So I have Carol, who is sitting in the center there. Carol Van de Hende is the Global VP of Digital Transformation for Mars. She brings decades of experience in corporate strategy, brand marketing, digital transformation, and digital for sustainability, market research, innovation, trends, foresight, and a lot of M&Ms.
Pounds of M&Ms just for you guys.
Yeah. She held US and global roles with multi-year assignments in China and short-term sustainability assignment at Ireland's Environmental Education Unit. She holds a BS in Industrial Engineering from Rutgers, and she serves as a board member on multiple nonprofit organizations. Far to my right is Leon Wallach. He has expertise in e-commerce, digital marketing, data-driven optimization across various industries, including travel, wireless, payroll services, etc. He is the VP of e-commerce and digital marketing at GS1 for over 2 years. He leads the digital marketing transformation of the Global Standards Organization, dedicated to the development and maintenance of supply chain standards. In his earlier roles, he has guided RCI, Wyndham Hotel Group, Virgin Mobile USA, etc., to achieve record-breaking sales and customer acquisition growth. And right next to me is Dennis Armeniak, in his current role as a Global CX Director for Havas Health. He brings 30 years of driving commercial success in both professional services as well as life science industry executive across multiple brands and therapeutic areas. He has launched a new digital therapeutics business unit for Orexo, focusing on the commercialization of novel digital therapeutics in the area of substance use disorder and mental health. Prior to this role, he has been with Accenture Digital Health Life Sciences Practices, Sanofi, Lovenox, and Plavix Marketing. So a lot of different experiences that we bring to you on this panel over here. Data, analytics, AI, any name that you call it by or refer to it by, we have huge expectations. And from what we hear, if you thought of how the last panel ended, it is how we make the future happen. Lucky for us, our panelists have brought that future into their current positions, and they are making it happen today. So let's learn more about how they do what they do. So data and analytics, as I said, is an integral part of our marketing world today. So to start us off, can you talk about how you use analytics, data, AI, etc. in your marketing world? We'll start off with Leon.
So how do we use it? So from a day-to-day standpoint, let me just say that from an AI standpoint, I feel like we're on the edge of it, right? We're trying to figure it out. Yeah. So what we depend on heavily on a day-to-day basis is we leverage quantitative and qualitative data from our tools that we have, GA4, for example. And we leverage that to, a lot of it is triangulation, right? To identify opportunities. So we take like an 80-20 rule approach, like spend 20% of your time to gather 80% of the data to drive updates and enhancements as it relates to the customer experience. So, and the measurement of that experience through our clickstream tools. An example of like how we use AI in that instance, though, is that GA4 oftentimes, right now, it provides recommendations on things that you can tap into, right? It's actively providing you information of things to look into. So we use it there. From a personalization standpoint, just layering it in that, again, we're leveraging a lot of the data that we are collecting right now as it relates to activity, behavioral data, where people are coming from, to then begin to provide the appropriate amount of targeting based off the personas that we've defined. So the data supports our customers, and our customers are at the center of our universe. So it's heavily focused on that. The other way that we use data, right, and this is probably going to sound a little less sexy, but it is pragmatic, is how we operate, right? So I run a digital marketing organization. We run Agile. and we're heavily involved, we're using data heavily to identify, one, how we prioritize our work, because the goal is to provide as much value as possible. But two, on top of that, how do we identify the complexity of the work based off a pointing system? And we leverage that to ensure that we're constantly rolling out as much value as possible to the business, right? The other piece is one of the things that we're looking at right now, if you want to wax poetic, is how we leverage chat. Now, if you think about member support and member services, they're in a lot of companies, they're a call center. You have a lot of people working there, but they're actually a doorway into our customers and helping our customers. But we want to ensure that these valuable resources to the organization are answering the most important questions with and oftentimes they're the most complex questions. So how do we use data to identify and intercept people with a chat and deflect a call so that we could free up those resources to actually receive calls that are much more complex? If you think about AI opens the door to actually take a lot of these simple questions that they get, our member support agents get inundated with, to also free them up. And then you can then leverage that to identify when they need to go to a chat agent, and then leverage that data to then say, oh God, this guy's really important. We need to get him on the phone.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure.
Carol?
Hi there. I'm going to talk about data, but before I do that, I just want to let you know I have two college students at home. I have twins who might be similar in age to you. And what I understand from them is they want to understand, what do they need to know to be effective in the job market? Is that relevant for anyone here? So perhaps when I talk about data, I'll give you 3 ways in which we think about it. And as you think about what are relevant capabilities for you to build. The 3 that we've been building as part of our digital transformation is, first, thinking about data as an asset. The importance of harmonized, truthful, reliable, real-time data is first and foremost. That's foundational. The second set of skills is around analytics. And that analytics has grown over time. So perhaps in the beginning, an Excel spreadsheet could be considered analytics. And we got a little more sophisticated by putting Power BI or Tableau on top, be able to create dashboards. Then we've been able to move into predictive analytics. And now there's so much conversation around AI and Gen AI because that can then take unstructured data. So as somebody with a background in strategy and marketing, I find these frameworks really helpful to think about how to organize your thinking and your learning around these topics. And then the third area of capability we've been building is change management. So data on its own is only going to be as useful as the people who are making sense of it, turning insights into foresight, and then driving action with that. And that requires understanding of business processes and change to make sense of it. So think about those capabilities as you might build them. Data as an asset, analytics, change management. And then to answer the question, how do we use the data? We're essentially translating that into value across our enterprise. That can include demand. How do we drive sales and marketing, which is really relevant for this group, but it also can support supply chain, understanding end-to-end supply chain, and then also the corporate functions. How do we run HR, finance, procurement? It's relevant across that entire chain. And as marketers, you actually do need to have a point of view across the entire value chain.
Perfect. Thank you.
Those are really both great comments, and I think I really want to emphasize this point about whether you're preparing for the job market now or you're in it, your opportunity to learn on a daily basis will really differentiate the career path that you take. So terrific setup comments. Business I'm in is I help clients. I work in life sciences and we work in prescription pharmaceuticals. And I run a global customer experience practice. So what that means is I spend a lot of time with clients in different markets around the world, helping to understand behaviors around decisions people make with respect to healthcare. That's both individuals and their families, as well as different types of providers, physicians, nurses, pharmacists, and a lot of the individuals that pay for therapy. We don't necessarily always have the benefit of explicit purchase data per se, but we spend a lot of time thinking about the customer experience and mapping those journeys out. And if you think about healthcare, it's a very different type of decision making that individuals go through. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about functional needs, emotional needs, personal needs, and collective needs. And so the way we use data, analytics, and different forms of intelligence are to help us to understand those different parameters. Because oftentimes in something like healthcare, we have all the science in front of us, but we may not always make the most rational decision for various reasons. And when we think about journeys, we don't have journeys that are defined and executed. We use data and analytics to help us learn, because each different pathway in a journey is dramatically different of which of those behavioral parameters are really going to matter. I'll give you a great example. I'm working with a client right now who has a brand new therapy, never been introduced before, that is in the area of type 1 diabetes, which is an autoimmune disease. And you can screen for this in advance, infuse the therapy, and you can actually delay the onset of type 1 by 3 to 5 or even more years. Completely change people's lives. So, but before there was no reason to screen. So we're looking at historical system data to look for signals of triggers along the way that could suggest someone's at risk by learning from people that have went on to become fully diagnosed, and then understanding the right kind of content that we can provide to help them respond to that in their journey along the way. So we use artificial intelligence to identify those signals. We'll use generative AI to inform those content assets we put into the market. But in the past, when I started doing this, I would say, okay, Carol, here's our journey for the next 6 months. We're going to do these things on these channels against these targets. Today, I don't know. I have a learning agenda, and I'm deploying initial things, and I'm reading them quickly to figure out, and for me, it comes down to two things. What do people prefer, and what do people respond to? And those are actually quite different at different pathways in the journey. So we use different data sets, different analytical tools, and different technologies to help us understand that in as quickly a fashion as we can, which allows us to then adapt our content and learn more as people move down these pathways.
Perfect. That's a very nice way of explaining the use of data, why we want to use it, why we want to stay on top of it, understanding the context in which it's being used, and making sure that we can change direction or our strategies based on what new information we get in our context, in our environment, to make the best use of our data is what's most important. Lucky for me, this panelist also has really very niche areas that they focus on. Dennis, for instance, his whole focus on health, mental health, etc. Carol and her passion in sustainability, and Leon and his great work in supply chain. So if I might go into my next question and ask, these are big world problems. These are big problems that we are trying to solve today in the world. And we as marketers, we own the messaging. We are kind of the powerhouse, the silent powerhouse when it comes out, when it comes down to reaching to our consumer base. How do you use analytics? How do you use data in solving these, or attacking these big world problems that exist today? Dennis, if we can get started with you.
Yeah, sure. So the first thing for me is, particularly in the category I work in healthcare, again, it's the comments like, I don't own the message. My job is to really help my clients listen as carefully as they possibly can. And the way we use data, for example, we use data and analytics to actually inform the creative we put into the market. And when I say creative, I mean the messages we're using to communicate to people, as well as the visual and experience-based components we're placing to the market. Today, we can use data to inform the creation of that, and then we can use that to learn how, again, preference response and adapt that along the way. So it's a big shift from marketing to, or starting with a brand-led approach and really stepping back and say you have to listen carefully to each of your customers. And again, I work in those 4 parameters of functional, emotional, personal, and collective. The marketing then becomes our ability to listen fast and deploy different types of content assets to better meet needs along a journey to help people learn and make decisions, and then learn about some of those behavioral triggers.
Perfect. Thank you. Carol?
It's such a great question. I do have such a passion for sustainability. It's probably helpful to give a little context in terms of Mars Incorporated thinking about sustainability. If you go to our website, you'll see something called a compass, in which the top half is what you would expect for a for-profit company. So driving total shareholder return, quality growth, being in tailwind categories. But the bottom half of the compass is actually what our shareholders want us to deliver. And we're privately held companies, so our shareholders are our family, the Mars family. They're asking for positive societal impact and trust and partnership. The top half allows us to fuel and invest in positive societal impact. So when we think about sustainability, we've made commitments in everything from healthy planet, which includes water use, land use, greenhouse gases, packaging, as well as health and well-being, and also thriving people. So the people that are in our value chain, how are we improving their lives? Data and analytics plays a role in all of that because you get what you measure. You have to be able to measure these accurately well to be able to put the plans together to achieve those. And we speak about it publicly because we want to inspire others towards those goals as well. I will add one other example, though, since we're talking about data and analytics and how to use. I was so inspired hearing Dennis talk about human health that, and maybe this is going back to the first question a little bit, but the data and analytics use in our, you might know our treats business really well. And yes, there's 5 pounds of pink and purple M&Ms at the front here. We're also an enormous pet company. So Mars Pet Care is not only in pet nutrition, Royal Canin, Pedigree, Temptations, but also we have a vet health business and a science and diagnostics business. Those businesses also leverage data and analytics. And one wonderful example that links to human health is pet health. So there's a shortage of radiologists in the vet health area. And what we found was some of their time, and maybe for each individual vet, it doesn't seem like that much time, but some of their time when they're reading an x-ray is just spent orienting the x-ray. Well, here's a great, this is where automation can make a difference. You take away the rote tasks so people can focus on the value-added tasks. So just orienting the x-ray in the correct way before the vet tech, before the radiologist sees it, saves maybe a fraction of a second or a few seconds per person, but that really adds up over a year, and especially when you're short on radiologists. But then we've been able to take it further with the use of AI, because now it can also not just orient the x-ray, but look at the content on the x-ray and say, is anything out of the ordinary? Am I noticing cancerous cells? And then the next step is to make a recommendation to the vet to say, what might these cells be? What might the diagnosis be? Now, with all AI, it's really important to have a human in the loop. And so, the radiologist in the end is making the final call. But it helps save time to say, here's an area to really pinpoint and look at. So I love your example. Thanks for inspiring me to remember this one.
Leon?
Sure. I like the idea of continuous listening, because that's really what our job is. And, the panel before us, they talked about there's so much data and there's so much to listen to. So how do you weed that out? So there's a tremendous amount of opportunity there. I'm the supply chain guy, really sexy topic, I know. But I think what it's important to know is supply chain is actually, by focusing on the supply chain, you can have an impact on the environment, on sustainability. So an example would be if you think about many of these companies that have to ship product in trucks. Having a healthy supply chain and being in touch with your data allows you to understand what you can pack into a truck, how much inventory you can pack into a truck. And if you can be incredibly efficient, that means you can ship more product in one truck, which means fewer trucks on the road, which means less fuel consumed, which has an impact on the environment. The second piece is, we were just talking about it earlier, is one of the interesting things that we work with industry. So we're not driving the changes to the supply chain in the standards in the supply chain. The industry is coming to us with problems, and we match them with other people with like problems. And one problem that was very interesting that was coming to us, which is, and we're not for profit, so we're doing a lot for the greater good, is food waste. Millions of tons of food is wasted every year, and the impact in the environment is very negative. And how do you use what we're known for as the barcode? Again, really sexy, but if you would apply it to the supply chain and the consumption of food, we are able to track a piece of product from a plot of land, like a piece of lettuce, all the way through the supply chain to your table, and we know if you consumed it or not. That capability exists today. Now, is it widespread? No. But if you think about the impact of that on the supply, on the overall food waste problem that we have globally, there's a significant opportunity there. So what's up with that with marketing, right? What's the connection? Well, my responsibility is to get the word out on these capabilities so that more like companies can get on board with this and to run pilots on this. So we have to continuously listen to what our members are looking for, but also leverage that information to get the word out and to target like companies so that they can jump on board the train and actually participate in pilots.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And actually, if you don't mind bringing up the video, I had a beautiful video that Carol was willing to share with us on Mars and sustainability view of Mars.
This is a critical moment to change the trajectory we're on. With our Sustainable Intergeneration Plan, we've been clear that we want to help build the world we want tomorrow. One where the planet is healthy, people and pets are thriving, and society is inclusive. It is our vision of the future. Our plan is built on what is right, not what is easy. It is science-based and in support of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. With the increasing impacts of climate change, the pandemic, and social injustice, we're as committed as ever to the critical actions needed to tackle the environmental and societal threats we face. We have aggressive targets to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and our commitment to renewable energy now comes with costs that compete or are lower than fossil fuel prices. We are also working to transform our agricultural supply chains, including accelerating efforts to eliminate deforestation in our key raw materials, such as palm oil. It's more critical than ever that we continue to play our part to meaningfully improve the lives of the million people we impact across our supply chain. We'll work to embed our values in our supply chain as we work on tough issues like human and worker rights, child labour and forced labour in partnership with our suppliers. And we're also working to enable consumers to make informed choices and to make safe food available to all. At Mars, we're committed to driving action and reporting on progress on our Sustainable Intergeneration Plan as we continue our journey to help deliver a healthy planet on which everyone can thrive.
Thank you. So in my interaction with my students, I try to instill in them a lifetime of learning and curiosity. You all come from an industry and a group that is talking about future technologies, making things happen in the future. What is your advice to our students? What should they be focusing on? What should they be learning now? Leon?
Sure. So I'm going to sound like somebody's uncle here. All right. So first, when we're talking about, I'm not going to get into the technology piece because I think ultimately it's going to, in 2 days, my recommendation could probably be very different, right? Mm-hmm. But I'm just going to take a very pragmatic approach as to what I'm recommending here. One, when you leave here and you go to your next job or your first job, go in thinking about how I can effectively measure the performance of my business. And one of the panelists earlier was like, what does success look like? And is my definition, does it align with the company's definition? Because if it doesn't align with the company's definition, you're probably looking at the wrong thing, right? The second thing is, if you are presenting information, and oftentimes in the world that we have, we've covered off, data is very complex, there's a lot of it. How do you how do you communicate a very complex idea to somebody who's not in your world? So take the time to understand who you're communicating to, where they're coming from, what their motivations are, whether or not they're somebody who wants to get into the weeds or somebody you got to keep it, just give me the facts, right? That's incredibly important. Because if you don't do that, you're gonna miss the mark. And the third thing that Uncle Leon is going to provide you today is the idea of learn to present an argument, right? You are going to go into meeting rooms in your next job, and you're going to have to present an argument. There will be, and you're going to say, yeah, no, that's not always true. That is 100% true. There is always somebody in the room who they either have an opposing view on a position, they're on the fence, and you want to get them to align with your opinion, or they don't care, and you just need to, or they may align with you, but you just got to remind them. If you do those three things, I think you'll be much further ahead than people who don't.
Perfect.
I love those. I agree with 100% of those. Really good advice from Uncle Leon here. So maybe Aunt Carol will just build on that by saying that I think there's a set of hard skills, and so we've been talking about analytics and data and AI and digital. Of course, those are relevant. But the soft skills, communication, influencing, conflict management, dealing with ambiguity, those are really important for the how. And then perhaps the one I'll add that's incremental, that's been helpful for me personally, and I've shared at schools when I've spoken at schools before, is to have some sense of your own personal why. I find the inspiring purpose question a very powerful one to ask myself. And also when I speak at conferences, I do recommend people to think about this. The question is simply, why do you do what you do beyond the obvious profit or functional purposes? It might sound like a simple question. It takes some thought to think about it. For myself, when I asked myself, and it's what I do at work, but also outside of work, like writing or serving on boards, I aim to inspire hope and empathy for people and planet. It helps give me a true north to say what to choose to do with our finite time. Time might feel like it's infinite, it is so finite. And choose what not to do.
Cousin Dennis, maybe, I don't know, give this a shot. Really terrific comments from both. Just a few things I want to add to it. One is, and I've learned this along the way, and I've had the opportunity in more years than I'd rather say of counseling people I've worked with. From a job situation, what I've found, there's three things that if you can identify these three things, you're in a really good spot. One is something you can learn from. And most of the jobs that I took that scared the hell out of me because I had no idea what to do, I got the most benefit from. The second thing is something you can contribute to, meaning whether you're part of a team, an individual contributor, something where you could demonstrate, if I wasn't here, this impact would not have happened. So you're showing your value, but you're learning along the way. The third thing is a supervisor who's going to push you in both of those areas. And if you can find that, now I'm not saying things like a title or size of team or budget or any of those things, because none of those things matter. What I've found really works well is if I can contribute, if I can continue to learn, if I have someone who's pushing me, generally that works really well. And then on the data and analytics piece, just because really terrific comments. Two more. One is be super suspicious of experts. Respect expertise, right? But good marketers are lifelong learners, and we're studying behavior, and nobody has figured that out yet. Respect expertise, but don't rely on it for where you're going tomorrow. And then I would say the other thing about metrics and data, if you can become a marketer who is not afraid of defining prospective metrics, you're going to be wildly more successful than most of your peers. What I mean by that is a lot of people look back and debate things after the fact. If you align prospectively, you could be wrong about that. And that's scary as hell. However, it makes for a much better learning and dialogue afterwards. So those are some points I would share.
Wow. So in many ways, you're asking each one of us to collect the data, analyze the data, and then anticipate the user or
That's why professor knows.
change before they hit us. And don't forget to thank your uncle, aunt, and cousin during your Thanksgiving dinners. So thank you very much. Finally, a very, very important question. We cannot talk about data without talking about responsible use of data. It has become so crucial in today's world. In not just with AI, but as Carol mentioned, with the whole idea of generative AI that has opened up new space. I've heard harrowing stories about GPT-4. I'm not sure. I was in a conversation the other evening from the Eagleton School of Politics, another branch of the Rutgers schools. And we had an esteemed speaker from Harvard Business School who really instilled a sense of fear within me when I speak about the tools like this without understanding my audience. So, how do you see marketers rising up to this challenge of tackling the use of data, the ethical use of data, the consumer rights, etc., that comes with the problem? Carol, can we get you started on that?
I'd say when we think about data and then AI or generative AI on top of that, we need to think about both the opportunity, which is how can it help us? How can it take away rote work, or how can it provide new insights that we didn't have before, as well as looking at the risk side. So we do need to go in eyes wide open around the risk. So there can be the potential for bias. There can be the potential for hallucinations, when it comes to AI. We sometimes call AI a confident toddler. It thinks it knows more than it actually does. And because of natural language processing, it sounds quite believable. But behind the scenes, it's just a large language model looking for correlations. And so with all of that in mind, it's really important, and I know Mars as a company certainly has really committed to, as we're using AI, it is a non-negotiable that we're using it responsibly. So we've put together an enterprise working group that is setting policy and guardrails, ensuring no harm, ensuring that we're using it in really ethical ways that are consistent with our values. And I think that's so important. And there are NGOs and other organizations to help businesses do this well, that have the expertise, even if we might not fully just believe in the experts.
Respect it. Just don't rely on it.
Yeah.
Sure. I'm going to keep it short and sweet. It's not a passive exercise. You need to stay awake and alert when you're delving into any data, let alone data that's going to be used on your behalf. So anything you do as it relates to AI, you have to be ethical about it. But also you have to take a measured approach to leaning into it. My company is a standards organization. That means we have to be accurate 100% of the time. So that's probably not going to happen right now with generative AI. So we're not necessarily delving into it publicly. We're doing work behind the scenes to ensure that it's ready for our purposes, and then we'll roll it out in a measured approach.
I think those are terrific comments, and I'll give you the business case to just build on what you heard. At Havas, for the past 20 years, we've been doing a survey called Meaningful Brands. And I love the Mars example in the video you shared. And we've actually demonstrated, it's pretty interesting, 90% of the world's brands could go away tomorrow and no one would care. 10 to 20% of brands stand out as truly meaningful. And this is from users around the world. And what's meant by that is they are purpose-driven, they are transparent, and they are actively committed beyond their core business. And those meaningful brands in that 20-year survey outperform their peers traded publicly by 250% and have an exponentially higher overall collective value over time because they don't just state their values and then act differently. They actually deliver upon them and make it foundational. And so today we're talking about meaningful AI, which addresses what you heard from Leon and from Carol. So there's a personal benefit, that purpose you can connect to. There's the standards benefit, and it's just really good business. And as marketers in the room right now, I consider marketing a profession, a science, and one I feel very passionate about. And I would ask all of you to strive to demonstrate that in your professional activities as you go forward. And when you do that, the fun thing about marketing is there's so much you can do and there's such an impact you can have.
Perfect, thank you. Before I move on, I do want to share a video that Leon shared with us. He called the barcodes a very sexy topic, and let's see what some of the behind the scenes truth is about that.
Hello, I'm John Phillips. I'm a Senior Vice President of Customer Supply Chain and Go-to-Market for PepsiCo, representing loved brands like Doritos, Lay's, Quaker Oats, Gatorade, and Pepsi, to name a few. We live in an age of, I would say, digital disruption. Virtually every consumer, 9 out of 10, carry a smartphone, and that tool has enabled an incredible amount of insight into the products they purchase and the products they discover and investigate. And the 2D barcode, which will replace the current UPC that's administered by GS1, will enable a whole new set of transformational capabilities under a global standard called the GS1 Digital Link that will enable new capabilities that are not possible with the current UPC barcode that we've had for the last 50 years. The ability to click on a PepsiCo product and get the definition of every single ingredient in a product and why it's in there in that particular formulation. So think about that. Trying to just physically fit that on a package, it would be impossible to go do that. Recently, there was a new allergen added to the US allergen list, something called sesame. And if you think about that, once it's identified, it's 18 to 24 months before consumer product companies refresh packages and can get that text on the package. Think of a digital world where if I had a digital activation on every package and it's been ratified in the legislation, the ink is dry on it, I can instantly provide that information to the consumer digitally. All of that is now possible with a single 2D barcode on a package enabled by the global industry standards from GS1 that actually create the GS1 digital link. The amount of information that consumers is seeking is expanding, it's not contracting. If you're not yet engaged in this conversation, the time is now.
I do have a newfound respect for barcodes.
I knew it.
Thank you so much. Since we do have 5 more minutes, I will touch on another topic that came up during the conversation that I was talking about 2 nights ago, where the danger that was brought up in terms of the newer technologies, use of data, misuse or abuse of data. The thought that was brought forth by the speaker was, the power is not, we are not scared of it because the big companies, the Fortune 15 companies, the Fortune 100 companies are the ones who are leading this initiative. We are scared because small companies, she mentioned OpenAI, 100 plus employees are making the decisions on behalf of the larger community, the larger global community. And that is where our danger lies, because a very small number of people are actually going to own how data is used, how data is managed and moved forward. I just want to get your thoughts on that as closing remarks. Dennis?
Sure. So, for me, this goes back to you as a marketer, you have a tremendous ability to practice and be transparent in your work. In my business, the value exchange in health are outcomes. Those are clinical outcomes. Do people get better? Do they feel differently? They're economic outcomes. Can you actually get proper care delivery at the right cost basis based on collective budgeting? And one that we spend a lot more time on now are patient satisfaction outcomes. What's the experience for that individual, particularly when you're talking about chronic conditions? And so where there are small groups starting to drive trends or bring new learnings to market, you can participate and join in with that in a transparent fashion. So even if someone else isn't shedding a light on it, you have the opportunity to do that. When you talk about generative AI, right now our industry are dealing with things like shining a light on hallucinations and bias. and how that shows up. Healthcare was when Watson first came out and started to apply this to clinical trials, nobody even understood the concept of hallucination and bias in data analysis. And we led some of those early aspects to really challenge that and drive a more diversified approach to learning from a clinical perspective. So you can sit on the sidelines and watch and talk about and debate whether people or things are going to happen, or you can use your influence to engage and bring that transparency along the way. And I think it's going to require that. And frankly, if you look back when that's happened, you get better outputs anyway for everybody involved.
One build is simply that, yes, a small group of people can drive a lot of change. You in this room are going to be sitting in those places to be driving that change. So think about the ways in which you can do so in a way that is consistent with your values and for the world that you would like to see in the future.
So this disruption is really needed for larger companies that are slower to move. This disruption with COVID, everybody talked about it, and that forced people to do things that were out of their comfort zones. And I actually think, going back to the points that were made previously, is these smaller players are putting bigger companies out of their comfort zones and driving innovation. And a lot of this innovation is based off of their adopting ideas that these smaller companies are presenting that are rolled into the bigger organizations because they fit within their business models. So the disruption doesn't happen, you just don't roll it into your business just because it's the cool thing. It has to fit within your business model, but it does accelerate it, which, I mean, COVID was not great, but it did, the benefits of what that disruption introduced has been fantastic for the end user.
Thank you. Shall we open it up for questions?
Or M&Ms or both.
Or M&Ms and both, yeah.
And if, while you're thinking about questions, maybe I can give you context for the M&Ms. These are custom M&Ms in pink and purple to match the covers of my books, because so Mars had these printed with my author photo and the name of my newest novel, Always Orchid, on there. So that's why there are 5 pounds of pink and purple M&Ms here with us.
You can't ask a question and eat M&Ms at the same time. That's the rule.
Do we have questions?
Hi, my name is Mike. Carol, I really appreciate your mention of like asking ourselves our own why. I think it's not talked about nearly as much, like some of those deeper aspects of life in the business world. And I'm just curious, to you two gentlemen, what are your whys? I know I'm putting you on the spot here, so.
From a work standpoint?
From a personal.
I mean, I wake up next to my wife every morning. So, is this thing on? No? Okay. So, I work for a not-for-profit. I actually am motivated by the greater good as it relates to the end user, the customer. And I like the idea of working for a company where I'm not beholden to the street and we can make decisions. Yeah, we have to make money. It's not like we got to pay for the greater good somehow. But then spending half my time driving the traditional e-commerce business, but the other half of the time supporting things like this discussion on food safety, which is a really big issue for the United States and the world, as well as drug safety, right? So those are things that are actually big, impactful initiatives and issues right now. But if I was working for a for-profit company, I probably wouldn't be able to spend as much time on that.
Thank you.
Quickly, thanks, Mike. For me, and I have a wife and 5 kids, so there's definitely a family connection there. But I've really come to appreciate and value the impact people can have on other people in a good way, and finding ways to do that. And that's why I love working in healthcare, because in the end, anyone dealing with any type of healthcare issue, what makes a difference there are people. And if you can find situations to do that, it gives me tremendous energy to work in that space.
Hi, my name is Elena, and thank you for your presentation. I really like most of your comments. They resonate with me in my experience, but I'd like to focus on one, which is you mentioned that marketers are supposed to be able to build up an argument and present the argument across like different groups. Usually it doesn't really work in real life scenario because first of all, because marketers sometimes speak different language and they have to explain concepts, etc. It takes time. Many different issues behind this concept of sharing your voice with a group of people, including your superiors, right? So it looks like we're talking a lot about data management, analytics, creativity, etc., behavior of our consumers. But does it really mean that we need to teach marketers or ask marketers to learn how to manage stakeholders, how to, how to be able to manage projects and share your voice and have some sort of measurement for that as well? It looks like there's another issue behind this particular enforcement because you're trying to enforce everybody to use your language, use your voice, share your expertise. But how a young marketer or marketers can do it with a great result? Thank you.
So one of the points I made earlier was, so yes, you want to present an argument, but the point I made before that was know your audience, right? Know how to position things to we're marketers. That's what you do. You target your message to the audience. And sometimes you keep it very simple. Sometimes you go very deep. But the key is to understand what motivates them, right? And the other thing is like, I think you used the word something, I'm paraphrasing, so forgive me, but like make them, right? We don't make anybody do anything. You convince them. You have to convince people, and you do it through the way you position your argument and how you deliver your message. That's incredibly important. You're not going to make anybody do anything, especially if somebody is not aligned with you to begin with. You have to convince them, right? You have to understand why it's important to them. So just because you want it doesn't make it so. So you have to put a little work into it. Anybody else?
Maybe just think both about not just the rational, but also touching the heart, not just the head, and think about your why, what, and how. So the clarity of why you're making that argument, then before you get to the what you're recommending, and then the how.
I just want to emphasize audience-led means listening. Like your job is not to tell your audience what you want them to know. Your job is to listen and understand their needs and triggers, and that's your target audience for your business, and it's your colleagues you work with every day. And change management is something that is not often taught, and I think you're speaking on this. And you really need to understand where people are in the change process and how to listen for that, and then serve the right information, argument, and purpose along the way. Otherwise, it's not going to resonate. So a lot of what you do as a marketer, if you can apply that to yourself and your own career, it also helps you become a better marketer because you find different ways to apply that. And it's literally something you deal with every single day, multiple times a day.
Okay, so we have a question back there. Do we have any online questions? Yes, one. We have one? Okay, let's take the online question and then I'll come to you.
The question is about data privacy, and exactly it says, do you believe there's a middle ground in terms of respecting consumer privacy while also using those same metrics for business decisions?
Quickly, it's a really relevant question in my opinion, because I'm working with a client today who's launching a brand in 4 years. The media landscape in 4 years is all the walled gardens that are out there that you can buy audience data and advertise to are all going to be gone. Brands in the future will rely on first-party audiences, and first-party means I give you my consent to engage with me. I will do that if there's a value exchange that matters. And so I think this aspect of really thinking from a first-party context, because you're not going to have an option. It's not even going to be something to debate. But it also, again, makes you a better marketer because the consent and the value exchange all comes back to, am I doing something that matters for my audience? And so I think that enables the data privacy with the consent to be relevant, compliant, and actually more meaningful over time.
Hi, this is Subodh. I had a two-part question. One is for Leon. The digital ink, that's a really innovative solution. But how do you get that proactively to the consumers rather than me going and checking every label? Because right now, like if I go to a store, I just buy the product. I rarely look at the barcode to understand what the ingredients are or what's the content, right? So like now with this digital and the connected digital ecosystem, how do I get that information once I have the product? And the second part to it is how do you integrate it with the healthcare system so that someone eats M&Ms more than what they should be, right? So how do you envision that?
So let me just first say I'm not a standards expert, but I am the marketing guy, which means I'm the funniest guy in the room. So it's available today, right? I think the opportunity is that, and you can acquire it through gs1us.org. Go to our website. You can put my name in. I'll get. No, just kidding. Like my point is ultimately it's available today. What we have is the infrastructure, the underlying, the technology at the store. In other areas, doesn't support it necessarily. Not 100% anyway. They have to upgrade some of the technology, but it's actually the bridge is not too far, right? The gap, it's very close. From one of the opportunities that we have is challenges around packaging, right? So I'm sure you guys live this every single day, but like the reality of the situation is if we wanted to introduce the 2D barcode, there's a transition period, which means you got the barcode and the 2D barcode taking up space, valuable space on a package. So there has to be a slow transition over to that. Right now, what we're currently doing is we're running pilots. We're recruiting and we're running pilots to actually begin the transition for that. A brand like Puma has already done the full transition. So if you want to see it in practice, and it's not just for food safety, but it's actually could be an extension of your brand and how you're presenting your brand online. But the amazing thing about that is from a Havas standpoint, right? Like you can actually start and I don't know what your experience is when there's an allergen issue or a problem around like these drug safety. Like it takes a long time to make change, but this is. You get the information, you load it, and it's there, and it's an immediate benefit to the organization. Hopefully that answers your question.
All right, let's put our hands together for this panel.